have the days gone by rather quickly, yet at the same time be one of the slowest. I know that might not make too much sense to some of you out there, but when you really take in consideration about what goes down when making a cartoon show, it takes a lot out of you. Now, I don't want to start dragging on about my own personal problems, as that's not what any of you here already listen to, so I'll just cut to the chase with the updates on the Backyardigans' backyard adventures. So for one, some of you who saw my last post most likely noted that I had forgotten to include some of the episodes that were originally going to be in the series, the new kid being one of those examples, and I want to apologize for that. It had been a rather late night for me that day, and of course, I didn't really want to spend too much time explaining everything that was going on, so I kinda skipped over a few episodes. But don't worry, those episodes haven't been cancelled, not by a long shot. In fact, these episodes in question are still in production, even as we speak. Now, when it comes to the show itself, nothing really has changed or been added to the story that really needs to be mentioned. I mean, I guess the only thing that could be made a mention of would be any kind of interest, is the episode The Backyardigans Get Loud. That episode's going by pretty good. And the episode in question is coming up right after this one, so there's that. Like I said, nothing really that special, but I guess it was just worth a mention. Anyway, let's actually get into this episode before I wind up going off topic and start monologuing as I usually do in these updates. The episode in question begins with the usual theme song and the like, compared to the last episode that had a lot added to it due to the special that was being made, Pups Save the Backyardigans, for example. Once the theme song had finally concluded, the scene faded in for a bit, before fading back in to show the title card of the episode. The title card for this episode showed a half-and-half view of one side, specifically the left, showing a rather typical, albeit well-decorated, looking fairground with various characters, most of them kangaroos of different ages and heights, doing different kinds of activities that one would normally do in a fair. The other side, however, featured the inside of one of the tents surrounded by candlelight, a makeshift altar of some sort in the middle, and a singular dressed figure in a purple cape and hood that was next to the altar itself. Above the picture was the main title of the episode, written in carnival-esque font, reading Roo Fest above it. The music was not exactly the typical carnival fair music that would normally be played in this episode like this, but instead was a lot more of a foreboding kind of music that I really didn't know what exactly it was. Definitely a new sound. After a few seconds of showing the title card of the episode, the scene then faded in on itself, as per usual, and then faded back in to show the usual backyard of the Backyardigans. Once the scene finishes transitioning, the camera then cut to show Tasha, Tyrone, Pablo, and Uniqua sitting down at the picnic table near Pablo's home. They all look rather bored, as they're just sitting there in the shade of Pablo's picnic umbrella. After a few seconds of everyone just sitting there in silence, Tyrone decided to break the monotony of the situation by asking, "I'm guessing you're all bored as well, right?" Tyrone asked, with the same flat expression on his face. "Yup," Pablo quipped before his head slammed on the wooden surface of the table with a thud. "Pretty much," Uniqua said as she stared at what looked like a worm inching its way over across the table. "Oh, for goodness," Tasha began before she was immediately cut off with someone, from off-screen, throwing a small plastic bucket on her head. "Ow! Who the heck did that?" Tasha demanded as she rubbed her head. "Do you always have to say that every time something goes wrong and when we're all bored?" Tyrone groaned. "Wait, you're the one who threw that at me?" Tasha scolded as she turned her head towards the orange mousse. "So what if I did? You still didn't answer the question," Tyrone answered back in that same flat tone. "I don't have to answer to you," Tasha pouted before the scene panned over to Pablo. "What happened to us?" Pablo said, completely out of the blue. The others immediately turned their head towards Pablo, completely taken aback by what he had stated, even going as so far to forget the little argument between Tasha and Tyrone in the process. "Wait, what do you mean, Pablo?" Uniqua asked. Pablo simply sighed and spoke. "What I mean is, what the heck happened to us? I mean, think about it. How long has it been since we've actually had an adventure together in our backyard? far too long. I mean, sure, we've had adventures outside of our backyard, which were cool, but still. I miss when we used to play outside and pretend that we were these wacky and fun people going on crazy places, Pablo said, rather depressingly. I know what you mean, Pablo, Tyrone said as the camera cut to him. But you gotta think about it for a bit. We're getting older, school's back for all of us, which means more work to do, and well, we just don't really have too much of the time. Pablo simply nodded, his upset facial expression not breaking away from his face. This, in turn, caused Tyrone to try and think of something to lighten up the mood. But, hey, buddy, Tyrone said as he gave Pablo a playful nudge. We still have Saturdays and Sundays this week to come over and do something fun to do. Once that rather depressing conversation had ended, the scene immediately cut to Austin popping his head out of the front door, the fence door that connected him to the other houses. His face was practically beaming as he made his way over towards the others, who looked at him with puzzled expressions. Oh man, you guys! Austin yelled as he made his way over towards the picnic table. Today's here! It's finally here! Just as Austin had finished his sentence, he reached out his hand towards Pablo and proceeded to pull him in for a kiss. On the lips, or in this case, beak. This went on for at least a good few seconds before Austin opened his eyes and immediately realized what he was just doing. Almost as quickly as he pulled Pablo in for that kiss, he quickly separated and placed Pablo back down on the ground. The two boys had deep blushes on their faces, and the camera quickly panned over towards the other three Backyardigans. Tyrone was looking at the both of them with a bit of shock, Tasha was laughing her ass off, and Uniqua was recording everything, or was most likely taking pictures, with a small pink digital camera. "Aw, man," Uniqua said. "Why'd you guys stop? I was just about to get another picture," Uniqua said as she placed her camera down on the table. The shot then went back to Austin and Pablo, whose faces were now about as red as beets at this point. Tasha's laughing could be heard getting louder in the background as a small thud was heard. The scene then cut to show Tasha practically rolling around on the floor, dying with laughter. "Oh my god!" Tasha yelled out, trying to catch her breath. "Okay, that made my day, you guys. That totally made my day." Both Pablo and Austin simply looked at one another before blushing for the final time and hesitantly scooching away from each other as quickly as they could. "So, Austin," Pablo said as he made his way over towards the picnic table, "what's this good news you keep talking about?" Austin blinked a few times. I guess he was still trying to get over that rather awkward but rather cute experience. He then coughed once and said, "Oh, yeah, the good news," Austin said, stuttering a bit. "Well, my family and I have been invited to an annual festival of kangaroos all over the country entitled Roof Fest." "What's Roof Fest?" Pablo asked, cocking his head a bit. "Well, Roof Fest is pretty much like I said it would be. It's a festival for kangaroos of all ages to go and have fun and interact together. There's games, rides, a ton of food, and even a couple of famous bands that come in and play in a large tent, which, if I read the flyer right, is various metal bands. Not only that, but each year there's a different theme with each of the festivals, making them all rather unique in their own way. This year's theme is the night moon, which all takes place during the mid to late evening and ends at dawn, supposedly," Austin said as his smile grew wider from excitement. "Well, it sure seems that you're going to have a lot of fun out there, aren't you, Austin?" Tyrone said with a small grin. "You bet I am. This weekend's going to be great," Austin yipped before looking over at the others and frowning upon seeing their rather bored expressions. "You know, guys," Austin began, "if you all want to come to the festival, you can." Pablo's eyes lit up for a bit before asking, "But wait, Austin, isn't Roof Fest supposed to only be for, well, kangaroos only?" Pablo asked. "Oh, no, Austin said, giggling. "While it's a celebration of kangaroos, there's no specific rules saying that it has to only just be roos." "But how much does it cost to get in?" Uniqua asked. "Completely free of charge for everyone who wants to go to it," Austin responded. Everyone, upon hearing that, immediately brightened up at that statement. "Well, guys, I think I know what we're going to be doing this weekend," Pablo said as the others nodded in agreement. Well, good. I'll go tell my parents that you guys are coming along with us, Austin said as he made his way back to the fence door. Oh, and don't forget about telling your parents too. Don't want them freaking out, wondering where you guys are at. The scene then faded in on itself for a bit before quickly cutting back to show a car making its way down an interstate, crazily driving itself in various directions and the like, before finally coming to a smoother pace. The scene then cut to show the inside of the car, with Austin's father and mother sitting at the front seats of the car, while all 5 of the Backyardigans sat, rather squished, next to each other in the back. Some of them even had to share seatbelts. "Oh, for goodness sake, why is it so tight in here?" Tasha said as she took a huge gasp of air from the other friends who were practically smothering her. Yeah, Austin should have said something about the car being too small to sit in. Now we're all cramped up together and it's kinda awkward, Pablo said as he tried to adjust himself between Austin's body and Tyrone's body at the same time. Well, you guys didn't ask. Also, what do you expect with only a family of 3? A giant minivan? Austin said, as he too sat sandwiched in between everyone. The sooner we get out of this car, the better, Tasha said. Hey, calm down, Tasha. The festival grounds is coming up soon. We should be there right about... Austin said as the scene cut out to the outside of the car, pulling up in a parking lot next to the festival itself. Now, Austin's disembodied voice said joyfully. Alright, kids, out of the car. You all go ahead and get to the gate. We'll catch up with you all later, Austin's father said as he got out of the car and proceeded to open up the passenger door to let everyone out. Thanks, Dad, Austin said as he jumped out of the car and began stretching his limbs. The other 4 simply moved themselves out of the car one by one, tumbling over each other as they did so. Well, that was a fun car ride, Pablo said sarcastically. Austin simply rolled his eyes and smirked before grabbing Pablo and the others in a giant swoop before darting over towards the front entrance of the place. Upon arriving at the entrance, there was a brown furred kangaroo with a smaller snout and head, unlike Austin, sitting at a booth, ripping off some paper bracelets and stacking them aside. He seemed rather dazed for a bit before Austin's cough caught him by attention. Huh? Who's there? The young teenage kangaroo with a rather high-pitched voice said as he stared down at the young group of kids. Oh, it's just you. Well, welcome to Roo Fest 19 and stuff, the kangaroo said, rather nonchalantly. Well, hello to you two as well, Austin said as he headed over towards the booth. Me and my family are here for our first Roo Fest, Austin said, rather excitedly as a huge smile spread across his face. The ticket taker seemed rather intrigued by this and even gave a smile as well to show how glad he was about it. Well, since it's your first time here, you know what that means, right? The ticket taker said. What's that? Austin said. VIP bracelets for you and your family, the ticket taker said as he held out a series of dark blue colored plastic wristbands. The ticket taker then looked down at the other animal children and then scratched his small black beard that was on his face. Huh. Wasn't expecting to see any other kind of animals here at this festival, the ticket taker said with a hint of disgust in his voice. And what is that supposed to mean? Austin said as he turned to face the ticket taker. Listen, kid, I'll give you and your family the wristbands, but them? They can't come in here, the ticket taker said with a bit of a nasty sneer. The other Backyardigans looked rather disappointed about what the ticket taker had said. Austin saw this and then turned to the ticket taker with a rather pissed off expression on his face. And why is that? Austin snarled. They're not kangaroos, kid. If they ain't roos, they ain't getting in. It'll break with tradition and screw everything up if these kids come in here, the ticket taker said. Austin, now practically fuming at this point, slammed his hand down under the ticket booth and said with a dark growl, You listen here, buddy. I could give less of a crap if they were roos or not. It's not listed in the rules that they can't come in, so you have to let them in. And if you don't, I'll make sure of it to break every single bone in your pathetic body. At this, the ticket taker began to laugh hysterically at what Austin was saying. You're funny, kid, you know that? Honestly, what the heck are you gonna do about it, little roo? The ticket taker mocked. This, Austin said as a dark purple aura immediately wrapped itself around Austin's arm, which in turn wrapped itself around the ticket taker's neck and began to slam around the tiny booth in a rapid succession for a good minute, before finally being let go and falling to the ground in a heap. Ah, okay, you win. Just take the bands and go already, the ticket taker said, groaning in pain as he threw the 8 blue wristbands out of the small window. Thank you very much, and I'll make sure to let your boss know what you've been doing, too, Austin said, laughing evilly as he and his friends made their way into the park. The scene then panned to show Austin and the others walking towards a section of booths, with the other kangaroos of various sizes, shapes, and colors, all walking around the place, either getting food, riding on rides, or getting items at the shops that they had set up themselves. Various carnival-esque rides all littered the area in a massive succession, while 2 large covered tents stood side by side to one another. Well, that was certainly something, Uniqua said. Yeah, sorry about that, guys. That guy was a bit too much of a trad whenever it comes to how Roofest is done here, Austin said as he made his way towards the startup of where the rides leaded. Wait, what do you mean by trads? Pablo inquired. Well, basically trad is short for traditionalist. You see, some kangaroos here in this festival have been around for quite some time, and during the olden times, there were many rules against allowing other species, like you guys, from attending the festival, as they all thought it would take away the quote-unquote purity of the moment, Austin said, cringing a bit at the mention of purity. That's actually pretty messed up when you think about it, Tyrone said as he placed a hand on his hip. Yeah, it was a more closed-minded time during that time. Thankfully, though, that rule has been lifted about 50 years ago, although nobody really invited anyone over until now, Austin said. So you mean that we're the first non-kangaroos to actually attend this festival? Tasha asked. Shockingly enough, yeah, Austin answered. I'm a bit curious to know if people will, not like us being here, Uniqua asked. You don't need to worry about that, Uniqua. It's certainly not something many roos have seen at Roofest. Many of the roos here are actually very accepting. Mothers are, heck, if anything, you might even actually be a rather popular group just from practically being here. If anything, Mother Zara herself actually was all for the idea of all species being included in Roofest, not just with kangaroos. Although, I can certainly say that Mother Daria definitely had to... Austin immediately closed his mouth at the mention of Mother Daria. Who's Mother Daria? Tasha asked. She's nothing important. How about we all go and have some fun now? We only have 8 hours to enjoy ourselves, Austin said, slightly nervous. Well, okay then. We'll be seeing you around, Austin, Pablo said as he and the others began to make their way towards one of the rides. Yeah, I'll see you guys soon. By the way, everything's free here. Just show them your wristband and they'll let you into the rides or make you whatever food you want at the food stands. Oh, and if anybody gives you any crap for being here, come and find me and I'll make sure to personally deal with them, Austin said. Okay, Austin, the others said in unison. Cool. See you guys. I'm going to hit the Gravitron. Woo! Austin called out as he sprinted towards the large alien-like machine. The others simply looked around and then parted ways at different parts of the fair. The scene then cut to a montage of various clips showing everyone enjoying themselves at the festival. Pablo was on one of the rides. I'm quite sure it was a roller coaster. Tasha and Uniqua were playing a few games at one of the booths, and Tyrone was practically stuffing his face with a heavy amount of chili cheese fries. This goes on for a good few minutes before the rest of the group headed back together, tired, but ultimately was having a great time. Man, those were some intense rides, Pablo said as he took off his propeller cap and began to fan himself with it. You're telling me and Tasha kept on kicking major butt at those prize games, Uniqua said as she and Tasha held up their various plush toys and other prize items. Well, I don't know about you guys, but the kangaroo running that fried food stand really knows what he's doing behind there, Tyrone said, letting out a small burp in the process. Really? Is it that good? Pablo asked. Pablo, no amount of pleasure could ever meet the level of those chili cheese fries I ate. Nothing, Tyrone said. Pablo and the others began to drool a bit, and his stomach, as well as Tasha's and Uniqua's, all grumbled at the mention of those cheese fries. Oh, man, that sounds really good right now, Pablo said. Let's quit chit-chatting and get Austin so we can all eat together, Tasha said. The scene then cut to show all the other Backyardigans making their way into different areas of the festival, doing their best to try and find their little kangaroo friend. However, they were not able to practically track him down. Soon, after a little bit of searching, they all gathered towards where the large tent was at, which was in the middle of the festival. Anybody have any luck finding him? Pablo asked. Nope, Tasha responded. Uniqua, did you find anything? Pablo said, turning towards her. I thought I did, a few times, but when I checked, it wasn't him. Can't tell you how many people I wound up running into that looked exactly like Austin, Uniqua answered. Pablo groaned and then rolled his eyes, completely annoyed. Oh my god, are you serious right now? Pablo said. We looked everywhere for him. Where in the world could he be at? The camera then cut to Tyrone, who suddenly heard a faint noise coming from the tent. He quickly turned his head over towards where the tent was at, and gave a small smile. Hey guys, I think I might know where Austin may be at, Tyrone said before motioning to the others to come and follow him into the tent, which they did. As they all walked into it, a sign right next to the tent in large bold words read out the following, featuring famous band playing today for Roof Fest, Animal Corpse. The scene then immediately cut to show the inside of the tent, with the startup of the riff to the song Hammer Smashed Face beginning to play in the background. As it did, the camera would cut to show various parts of the tent with either shots of the band, all kangaroos I might add, doing their performance, and then showing everybody in the crowd either headbanging like crazy or going absolutely nuts in a large mosh pit. Honestly, it was pretty damn funny to say the least, especially given the fact that somehow, somewhere, somebody actually managed to sit there and actually get Cannibal Corpse's permission to actually play one of their songs in the episode. This humor only intensified when Pablo, Tyrone, Uniqua, and Tasha all stuck their heads into the entrance of the chaos. Whoa, what the heck? Pablo yelled out in shock. The scene then cut back once more to a full layout of both the band and the crowd going absolutely nuts, while the faint vocals continued, while the heavy beat of the drums, bass, and guitars slightly overlapped the lyrics. Likely chances as a way for parents not to sit there and get particularly pissed off when hearing the actual lyrics, although even though speaking, anybody who listens to it is probably going to have a hard time figuring out what's being said anyway, unless you've read the lyrics. The camera then cut back to show the rest of the Backyardigans' faces, with the exception of Tyrone, looking absolutely mind-blown at what they were looking at. Come on guys, let's start searching, Tyrone said before doing his best to start mingling with the crowd, headbanging and even doing a little bit of windmilling as well. The others followed him without much being said between any of them, likely chances because of the shock at what they were looking at. They all continued to look through the large crowd of kangaroos, with Pablo nearly getting crushed by one who had done a stage dive. Oh, for goodness sake, Tyrone, out of all places, why in the world would you think Austin would be in here? Tasha finally said, practically done with the heavy amount of sweaty roos and the loud music blasting into her ears. Well, Austin for one actually loves this band. I mean, last time I rode in his car, he was blasting this song, like, a lot. So if anything, he'd probably be here, jamming around with all the others, Tyrone answered as he and the others attempted to get out of the mosh pit that they had suddenly gotten themselves stuck in. Just as they were about to keep looking, a large hand immediately grabbed them from behind. Whoa, 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 what are you kids doing in here? The others immediately turned around and were met with the face of a light blue-skinned kangaroo in a police uniform. You kids shouldn't be in here. Didn't you guys read the sign? The officer demanded. What sign? Pablo asked. The officer then pointed his finger over towards a small sign at the entrance that read, 21 years and up only. The kids gulped, knowing that they were in some trouble, but were immediately being dragged out of the tent and thrown onto the grass outside. "Don't let me see any of you kids in here again, or there will be trouble," the officer said before making his way back inside the tent. The others immediately got up and then proceeded to dust themselves off in the process. "Well, I see that you guys got kicked out too," Austin's disembodied voice called out. The others immediately looked up, and then the camera cut to show Austin standing there with a grin on his face. "Hey, Austin, where the heck have you been? We've been looking for you all over this place," Uniqua asked the young kangaroo. "Why were you guys looking for me? Did anybody make fun of you or give you any trouble?" Austin asked rather seriously. No, we were just wondering if you wanted to chow down on some chili fries with us," Pablo asked. Austin's face then went back to the soft, happy expression that it originally was, before saying in an upbeat tone, "Oh, well, sure, that sounds great." With that, all five of the group had made their way towards one of the food stands that Tyrone had made a mention of, which thankfully hadn't been occupied by anyone. Tyrone had ordered for everybody, and soon they all sat down next to a table next to the stand, and started practically going down on the cheese fries. Even Tyrone himself snuck a couple of them, despite the fact of him actually being full. The scene then cut to show everyone all reclining in their chairs, bellies full of fries and chili and cheese, and their faces covered in a bit of the cheese residue. "That was the best thing I've eaten all day," Pablo said, letting out a small burp in the process. "You're telling me," Tyrone moaned. "Those were probably even better the second time around." "Man, I'm so glad that we all came here today. It's been so much fun," Austin said, patting his enlarged tummy. Everyone simply remained silent for a bit to enjoy in the afterglow of the meaty, cheesy goodness they had just consumed. Then after a moment, Tasha began to ask Austin a question. "So, Austin, who's this Mother Daria that you were speaking about earlier?" Austin's eyes widened a bit at that question, almost as though he really wasn't very comfortable answering that question. "I'd rather not say," Austin answered. "Come on, Austin, you've already told us about Mother Zara and everything else in that giant book you showed us. Why can't you tell us about her?" Tasha said once again. "Wait a minute, who's Mother Zara?" Pablo asked. Uniqua was going to explain the whole thing to Pablo, but immediately stopped and said under her breath, "Oh, that's right, Austin wiped your memory." Austin then proceeded to sit himself up as best as he could, and then proceeded to give a brief summary of who Mother Zara was, the origin of his powers, and pretty much everything else that had already been explained back in the episode Psycho Penguin. So this really wasn't anything that really needed to be mentioned again in this post. Once he had finished saying all that he had said to Pablo, Pablo simply sat back in his chair with an interested look on his face and said, "Oh, well, that certainly explains a lot. That's actually pretty cool," Pablo said. There was another bit of silence after that before Tasha went back to her pestering. "So, Austin, why don't you want to talk about her? I mean, if she's anything like your Mother Zara, then it would seem that you're..." Tasha was immediately silenced when Austin glared at her in a deep, angry way. "If you really want to know, Tasha, that's fine," Austin said, slamming his cup down on the table hard, startling the others with the sudden anger in his voice. "Normally I wouldn't say anything about her, but since you asked, basically when it comes to her, I don't like her. In fact, I really, really don't like her. I'd say that she's probably number 2 on the list of people that I absolutely hate with a passion. The first one being Mark," Austin said. "Wait, why do you hate her so much?" Pablo asked. "Here's the thing about Mother Daria. Although I really hesitate to even call her Mother. You know how I mentioned that there being many trads at this festival that have a disdain for other species of animals, minus kangaroos attending this festival?" Austin asked. The others nodded. "Well, Mother Daria is like if you combined all those trads into one giant ball and then soaked it in water for about a month. She's likely one of the foulest kangaroos to ever grace our presence. She not only has this mentality that only ruse like myself could ever attend this festival, but she goes a step further by even bashing and demonizing anybody that isn't a part of us, by claiming that anyone who ever found out about this about this or whatever that wasn't a part of the group would conspire to wipe us all out or something like that, Austin said. The others' jaws dropped when they heard what Austin had said. Wow, that's really messed up, Tyrone said. Oh, Tyrone, it only gets worse than that. Not only does Daria herself treat everyone that isn't a Rue like crap, but she also shuns any other Rue that has friends outside of this group. If she were to ultimately find out about our friendship, oh my god, she would attempt to do everything to take anything away from me and my parents, and then proceed to shun us in the process, and then force anybody else to do the same. Thankfully, though, not everyone in this festival acts that kind of way. Even the more traditional ones think that her mentality is a bit too much. But if almost everyone hates her, including you, then why is she even considered, well, a mother to begin with? Why not just kick her out of the group or whatever? Pablo asked. That's the thing. It doesn't work like that. You see, the title of mother is one that isn't given to anyone at just any time. There's a big process that goes on when it comes to having to choose who our quote-unquote mother is. Now, the simplest way of obtaining this title is if someone who was the mother beforehand explicitly states, whether it be in her will or during her life, that a specific person is to be chosen to become the next mother, thus kinda passing it down. However, this is a very rare occurrence, and oftentimes is never done by the other ones, so that the other Rues from across the world have a chance to pick who they ultimately feel would be worthy. The way that they do this is by a vote. You see, the title of mother is something that is bestowed upon someone for life. You can't leave it, nor can you resign from it either. Even if you're universally hated by everyone within the group, you're still considered an absolute head of the Ruse, more or less. At the very least, though, the person could ultimately hand over the official business and legal documents to somebody else to run, Austin said, before taking a long drink of his soda. Everyone at the table now looked completely infatuated at what Austin was talking about, and they all urged him further to keep on going. Well, as for Mother Daria, there was a bit of an issue when it came to the voting process. You see, after Mother Zen died 7 years ago, there was a bit of an issue that happened when the ballots that were sent off to the houses of all that were registered within our group. Apparently, the computer that carried all the addresses had fallen to a virus that scrambled everything, and thus the whole population of kangaroos weren't able to make their vote in time. So a compromise was made with 12 Rus of high ranking in regards to the controlling of that they had over their powers, that they were substituted for the actual voting process itself. Well, the problem with that is that all of them were crazy old trads, and they made sure of it that they chose one of the harshest, meanest, and broadest of them all, which was Mother Daria. When she had been chosen, all kangaroos, including my father, had to leave for the ceremony of candles that ultimately made her the official mother of all Rus. Basically, it's an ordination coronation process. It takes a little bit, but it's ultimately very dramatic. And since then, she's ultimately been ruling this whole thing with an iron fist, Austin concluded. The others were rather shocked at this backstory that Austin had given them. So, hypothetically, is it possible for a male kangaroo to become a head of all of this? Tyrone asked. Austin scratched his chin for a bit in thought before finally saying, technically it's possible. Mother Zara herself said that anybody, regardless of whether or not you were male or female, could be head of the Ruse. However, as of now, that hasn't really happened yet, Austin answered. Wow, this lady sounds like a real witch, Pablo said. With a capital B, Tyrone chimed in. Yeah, she's a pain. But unless something happens to her, we're stuck with her, Austin said. Just as Austin had finished his sentence, The sudden sound of a church bell rang out, causing everyone in the community to immediately stop what they were doing. Then, one by one, every single kangaroo there began to either close up shop, get everyone off of the rides, or simply leave whatever booth that they were at. Soon after, Austin's mother and father had made their way up towards the kids. Austin, what's going on?" Pablo asked quietly. "It's that time. The great meeting of roos at the old chapel up at the hill," Austin said, pointing up towards a small hill with a large church-like structure atop of it. "Have you guys eaten enough food?" Austin asked. Everyone nodded their heads. "Okay, good. Mom can drive you all back home, seeing as everyone's already making their way towards the meeting," Austin said, hopping off the chair that he was sitting on. The others looked rather perplexed at what Austin had said, and soon became vocal about what was going on. "But, Austin, aren't you coming home with us?" Pablo asked. "No, I need to attend the meeting as much as everybody else here does. Same thing with my father and my mother. My mom's gonna go and take you guys and drop you off at home, but she's gonna be coming right back. But don't worry, I should be back relatively soon when it ends," Austin said. "Wait, we don't want to leave yet. If you're not going home, then neither are we," Tyrone said. Austin looked up at them for a bit before giving a worried look on his face. "Are you sure about this, guys? I mean, what if Mother Daria is the one leading this year's meeting?" Austin asked. "We'll be quiet and stay out of sight," Pablo answered. Austin then looked over at them and then towards his parents before letting out a sigh, and then proceeding to motion for all of them to follow him. "Okay, fine, you can come. But you need to listen and do exactly what I say, okay? The last thing we need now is for Mother Daria to spot any of you here," Austin said, before leading them all towards a large chapel on the hill. The scene then transitions to show a close-up of the church-like structure, with many kangaroos of various shapes, sizes, and colors making their way into the chapel. The scene then cuts to show the interior lobby of the area, with two sides of the place with two separate racks of black robes that hung in multiple sections. Austin, being one of the people in the group, immediately put on his black robe, before tying a cincture around it. Once he completes this, he quickly grabs another few sets of robes and then hands them over towards the other Backyardigans. "Put these robes on, and no matter what happens, do not pull down your hoods. Do you understand that?" Austin said firmly. The others nodded in agreement, but were quickly placing their own robes on, most of which seemed to be a lot larger on them than usual, but they didn't complain in any way. Likely chances it was done more for their safety than anything. Then once they were all ready, they entered into the large chapel-like area with solid oak pews, a stage with a table full of candles and a few chamber pots, and lastly a few lights hanging down above that provided a dim light to the interior of the chapel. Once everyone was seated, the scene then transitioned over to show Mother Daria making her way onto the stage with the table and candles rested. She bowed before it before turning towards the rest of the group. "Greetings unto all of you, my children," Mother Daria said, "and greetings be upon you as well, venerated Mother." Everyone in the congregation responded back. The female kangaroo then proceeded to turn towards the table and candles, and then lifted up one of the chamber pots into the air. "To all here present, accept my blessing unto this night," Mother Daria responded. She then turned herself back to the table and then picked up a small dagger before making her way towards a small rope that connected to a large purple drapes. Without another word, she took the dagger and slashed the rope, causing the drapes to fall to the ground, revealing a large picture of who I assumed was Mother Zara herself. Her appearance was honestly very well detailed in this episode. Mother Zara herself had long flowing black hair that reached down to her tail. She wore a series of robes that were in the colors of blue, purple, and pink that swirled together in a lustrous tie-dye kind of way. On her head was a large crown upon it, and lastly on her right paw was a large wooden staff that was a lot longer than she was. She herself also was purple. The rest of the icon itself glistened with the light from the interior of the chapel. Mother Daria then proceeded towards the icon, made a soft bow, and then said, "Unto thee, O Mother Zara, founder of this pure light, we dedicate this night unto thee. Hail, Zara!" Everyone in the pews responded back with a loud, "Hail, Zara!" before a gong was struck, signaling the end of the invocation. Daria then turned to the group, and then motioned for all of them to sit down, which they all did. The camera then cut to show Austin and the others sitting down in a single pew, with Austin's parents sitting right behind them in the next one. Everyone, with the sole exception of Austin that is, all looked rather unnerved by the strange invocation that was given. Austin, just wondering, are we in some kind of cult or something?" Pablo whispered to Austin. Austin slowly turned to him and answered in the same whisper, "Nah, it's just a typical invocation that's always done each year at the festival. I think it might be in our books or something," Austin answered back. The scene then cut back to show Mother Daria standing in the middle of the podium, beginning her lecture. "As you all should know by now," Mother Daria began, "I have been the head of this group for 7 whole years now, and I plan for that to stay that way for a good long while." There were a few groans that came out of a good portion of the congregation, which seemed to not sit well with Daria. She then smacked her wooden staff against the gong, which silenced their groaning. "Now all of you should know better than to groan like that. It makes you all seem like outside filth," Daria said with a hint of disgust in her voice as she said the last word. The faces of a few individual kangaroos in the pews looked at Daria with disgust at what she had said, while a few others didn't exactly seem to be too surprised. She continued, "I'm not going to make this meeting long, so I'm just going to cut to the chase here," Daria said before turning towards the altar and grabbing a large scroll and opening it up in the process. "You see, my children, we have a bit of an issue that needs to be addressed. And I don't think for a single second that we need to waste any more time than we already have. What I'm referring to is our yearly festivals, and most importantly our daily lives," Daria said, before grabbing a small dagger and placing it onto a holster in her cinture and that held the robe up. "As the head of the ruse, and the descendant of Mother Zara herself, it is within my power and authority that I forbid anyone in this chapel and outside of such to ever engage and befriend anyone outside of this congregation and outside of the ruse," Daria exclaimed. There was an audible gasp coming from the majority of the ruse there, who in retaliation began to let out various calls and insults towards Daria. The scene then cut back to Austin and the others, who also took part in the booing as well. This, however, did not sit well with her, and with little effort, her hand started to show the same aura as Austin's, but much darker in tone. She then, with a flick of her wrist, let out a large shockwave that knocked everyone who was out of their seats back into them with a hard thud. "I am really disappointed with all of you that you would talk back to your mother like this," Daria said, rather annoyed. "The fact that all of you think that these outsiders, these monsters you talk with, are more important than our own congregation. Need I remind you all these outsiders that were once that persecuted Mother Zara throughout her life? Looked down at her, tortured her, called her a witch, and yet you all spit on her grave by thinking you could be in any kind of friendship with these monsters," Daria yelled before quickly calming down. "That is why I am making this all easier for you. I want you all to sign the contract in your blood as a binding agreement. You will no longer associate yourself or have any relationships or friendships with anyone outside of our congregation and anyone outside of your species. Now until the end of time," Daria proclaimed. It didn't take long for the entire congregation to immediately object, with a few exceptions being from a couple of trads, to this ruling, and in a loud voice they all pretty much refused to sign the contract. I see. If none of you are willing to sign it, then so be it, Daria announced before immediately grabbing a button out of her back pocket in her robe and pressing it. The scene then transitioned to show a series of metal collars wrapping themselves around the necks of all of the kangaroos, as well as the backyardigans' necks, pinning them to the pews in the process. A soft, glowing aura wrapped itself around every single one of them, with the sole exception of Austin's, which flickered but ultimately stopped working apparently. Everyone soon began to panic at this process and did everything that they could to try and release themselves from the grip, even trying to sit there and use their powers to get it off, but found that they were completely unsuccessful in doing so. The panic continued to grow, but was soon stopped when Daria slammed on the gong one last time. "Never again shall you defy me. Sign the document and you will be free to leave. Reject it and then face the wrath of me. I can, and I will take every power away from you if I so desire. Now!" Daria then stopped speaking, and then immediately spun her head towards where Austin and the others were at. The camera then cut to show Pablo attempting to remove the collar from his neck in a panic. However, in the process, his hood came down, revealing him. Mother Daria then immediately stormed over towards him, and without any warning, grabbed the young penguin by the neck, ripped the collar off of him, and then proceeded to lift him up in the air. "You... What are you doing here?" Daria said with a cold tone of voice. Pablo didn't say anything, but instead whimpered in the process. "I said, where did you come from, little birdie?" Daria snapped. I was invited," Pablo said aloud. "I see. I guess that you didn't get the opportunity to check up on our rules, didn't you?" Daria said. She then proceeded to turn to the rest of the chained congregation of kangaroos, and then proceeded to shout, "Who was it that invited this unclean specimen to our gathering? Who? Answer me now!" Daria screamed. Nobody said a word. This only infuriated Daria even more. The scene then cut to show Daria making her way over towards the altar, Pablo in hand, before slamming him down onto the altar table rather violently. "I see that I have to make an example of you all here. You all know the rules that I implemented here at this festival. No outside filth in this sacred area." Daria snapped once again before turning towards the cowering penguin. "And you? Well, I guess I just need to sit there and show everyone what little worth you vile monsters are to the world. Oh, and before I forget..." Daria then immediately lifted up her now glowing purple hand, and with one move of her palm, Tasha, Uniqua, and Tyrone were all lifted up in the air as well, their hoods ripped off from their heads. Not one, not two, not three, but 4 unclean monsters here at this gathering. I'm really disappointed at whoever decided to invite these people." Daria snarled like a dog. The scene cut back to Austin, who was now ripping at the collar with all of his strength, finally breaking it in half, removing the device and holding it tightly into his palm, where the camera cut back to show Daria unleashing a dagger from her belt. "There is one good thing you unclean monsters are good for, and that's food," Daria said, licking her lips. You're gonna eat us?" Pablo yelled out as he struggled even more than before. "That's all you're good for anyway," Daria said before lifting up the dagger, ready to plunge the blade into Pablo. But just as she was about to strike, one of the collars immediately smashed itself into her hand with the dagger, sending the blade flying and getting stuck into a wall. The scene then cut to show Austin making his way over towards the stage with the altar and the demented mother, quote-unquote. The camera then cut back to show Daria turning around and giving a slight grin on her face. "So you were the one who invited these people here, weren't you?" Daria said coldly. For one, they aren't monsters. They're my friends. And secondly, if you think you're just gonna eat one of my friends and treat them like trash, then you got another thing coming, you vile witch! Austin snarled, ripping this thin robe off of his body. Daria's expression then went from amused to pissed off in less than half a second because of Austin calling her a witch. How dare you speak of your mother that way? Daria growled. As far as I'm concerned, you're no mother. You're a witch! Austin snapped back. In a fit of rage, Daria immediately threw Pablo down to the ground, and her arms began to glow with a darkened purple aura. She then immediately lashed out at Austin with a blast of the aura, which Austin quickly dodged as best as he could. Daria continued to land shot after shot of the darkened aura at the young kangaroo, trying to blast him, but was unsuccessful in doing so due to his small stature. The scene then transitioned over to show Austin landing right back down in the middle of the spot where Daria had first blasted him. He gave her a devious smile. Looks like you aren't that powerful after all, if you can't even blast me, Austin said in a smug tone of voice. You're really pushing your luck, kid. You have no clue how I could easily eviscerate you from the face of the earth right now. Daria jeered. Austin simply giggled at that, and then said once more, How about I make you a deal, Daria? Austin began. You and I will fight this one. Right here, right now, one-on-one. Daria then began to cackle loudly as she grabbed Pablo and then proceeded to throw him with the others, who were still levitating a few feet off of the floor, in a large bubble of aura. The camera then cut to show Austin simply standing there with a frown on his face. You think for a single second that you can actually beat me? Daria howled with laughter. I've had more time and control over my abilities than you can ever dream about it, Rue Boy. But since I'm gonna love smashing you into the dirt, then I accept your offer. But honestly, why does it even matter? Even if you do win, even if you manage to beat me, I'm still gonna be the head of the kangaroos. So unless you plan to kill me, then go right on ahead. Fine then. It'll be a battle to the death, Austin said softly. The screen then cut to show Pablo and the others looking at Austin as if he was absolutely fucking insane. Austin, what in the world are you doing? Tyrone called out from the aura sphere. She's 10 times more powerful than you, Austin. You're gonna get creamed, Pablo yelled at as well. The scene then cut back to Austin before he let out a little laugh. I don't care. I'm willing to die for my friends, just as I'm willing to kill for them too. Not just for them, but for my family and all the Roos here. Your disgusting rules and the people who voted in you will never align to what Mother Zara has ever taught in her book. She taught us all that all creatures are equal, and that we must treat them like such. Anyone, and I mean anyone, can be a part of this group, Daria, no matter what their species is. And as far as I'm concerned, you will never be a descendant of her. You'll never, ever speak for this group. You will never, and I repeat, never, ever be anything else more than a vile, evil witch. Austin spat as the purple aura began to envelop him, while he closed his eyes, only for him to close his eyes momentarily, or snapping them open to revealing the lavender colors surrounding the pupil, glowing as it did. Daria, now ready, charged at Austin, smashing into his gut, sending him flying across the chapel at a fast pace, or slamming into the doors. Austin immediately got up from where he had been hit at, and then bolted, flying towards her, ready to land his first punch. However, Daria immediately was enveloped by a dark purple mist, and then dissipated, before spawning behind Austin and landing another punch to his back, sending him crashing into the icon of Mother Zara herself. However, before he could get up, Austin grabbed the young kangaroo and then uppercut him so quickly that it caused him to practically go smashing out of the steeple of the chapel. As he was flying up in the air, Daria made her way over to him at a fast pace, But this time, Austin was cunning and smashed his fist into her skull, knocking her completely off guard. The young kangaroo then emitted purple balls of fire in his palms and then shot them at the woman. But she dodged them and made another comeback at Austin and proceeded to land punch after punch after punch on the young Roo before grabbing his tail and flinging him on one of the festival rides, smashing it into pieces as he collided with it. Austin sat up in the wreckage and then immediately teleported away from Daria, who was now practically making her way towards him once again to land another blow. Once Daria had crashed into the broken wreckage, her entire face was now cut up and bruised, as well as Austin's. She growled and then proceeded to try and search for him. Needless to say, he popped up behind her and drop-kicked Daria all the way back down into the hole that was the steeple, crashing into the pews in the process. However, nobody's collars had been undone in the wreckage. Austin then proceeded to fly back down into the chapel before being grabbed again by Daria and repeatedly kicked in the stomach. Austin winced in pain before coughing off a small amount of cartoony blood. The last thing that she did was charge up her dark aura and then jammed it into Austin's stomach, causing the young Roo to scream out in pain, before going limp and falling to the floor with a thud. The scene then cut back to show Austin lying in a heap on the floor. His entire body was beaten, bruised, and his clothing was torn and ripped in multiple parts. He slowly looked up with as much strength as he could muster, the blood now dripping from his mouth in the process. Daria simply grinned at him and made her way over towards the aura that held Austin's friends, before Pablo was grabbed by the neck once again and smacked back down upon the altar. The other Roos attempted to try and get out of their collars to try and help Austin, but it seemed as though the collars had messed with their abilities, and thus they were completely helpless to help the young Roo. Looks like I win. Such a shame, too. I thought you'd actually be a better fighter than that. But now that I've won, it's time to feast upon these monsters. Daria then immediately grabbed another dagger from her belt and began to raise it high in the air. Austin saw this, and the sudden shock of seeing Pablo about to be impaled caused a burst of adrenaline in the aura to flash back into him. He then formed a white, hot fireball and threw it at Daria's hand that held the blade. She screamed as she attempted to try and put the flames out, dropping the knife in the process. Austin then proceeded to form another white fireball and then throwing it at her other hand, thus making them completely burnt and worthless. Looks like the tables have turned, you filthy witch. Without your hands, you can't do crap, Austin snapped as he started to laugh and cough at the same time. Daria's eyes grew wide, but with as much strength as she could muster, she grabbed the dagger in her burnt hands and then charged at Austin once more at a fast pace to try and get him. This time around, though, Austin had the advantage. The scene then cut to the outside of the chapel before the entire steeple was smashed to bits as a white light blasted from the top of it. The screen then cut back to show Austin and Daria making their way higher and higher up in the sky, as he did in most of the episodes so far, before he finally stopped. Daria was now broken, bruised, and seemed to have both her arms and legs completely destroyed in the process of whatever Austin had done to her before the cut. He then glared at her with deep hatred. If there's one thing you don't mess with, you evil witch, that's my friends and my family. I've had to say this so many times to so many people, yet nobody wants to listen. This time around, vile witch, I'm going to end you right here and right now, as we agreed, Austin whispered with a heavy tone of rage filling in his voice. Then he immediately spun around and smashed Daria, sending her flying downwards towards the chapel floor, which she landed without damaging the floor, but instead her entire body. She gasped for breath as Austin made his way down slowly towards her. Seeing that she was immobile, he placed his hand on her stomach, closed his eyes, and then said loudly, "Vile witch, thy power be revoked, thy soul be ripped from thy body. May ye never destroy another soul with your wicked corruption. So shall it be. Then, with as much force as he could give, he slowly began, his arm began to grow purple, and he smashed it into Daria's chest, and then slowly but surely began to rip away at Daria's mark, pulling a large, misshapen, dark purple aura from her body as she screamed in pain. A bright white light then soon enveloped the screen, nearly blinding me in the process. Then with one final tug, the young kangaroo yanked out the aura itself, as well as her soul, and instead of consuming it as he did with Pablo's, he crushed it into his fist. And as he did so, Daria slowly turned into a solid mass of dirt before crumpling and being blown away into the wind, leaving only her robes behind in the process, as well as the button to the collars. Austin smiled as he stared down at the robes before grabbing the button and crushing it into his palms like a soda can, releasing everyone from their traps. Pablo, Tyrone, Uniqua, and Tasha were all freed from the dark aura as it finally dissipated, and then proceeded to rush over towards Austin and give him the biggest group hug they could give him. All the while, the sound of applause and cheering from the congregation of kangaroos flooded the speakers. "Thank you so much, Austin." Every one of his friends cheered as they held on to Austin a bit tighter. Once the cheering had finally died down, one of the roos immediately made their way to the stage and announced, "Seeing as how Mother Daria is no longer with us anymore, I think it's only fair that we all have a vote to see who should be the next head of the kangaroos. And as my first contribution to this poll, I nominate Austin," the dark brown kangaroo said as he pointed towards the young roo. Almost immediately afterwards, everyone in the group began to shout out Austin's name, almost in the form of a chant, practically voting for him almost immediately in the process. It didn't take long before everybody ultimately made their decision, including many of the supposed trads themselves, and Austin obviously was nominated for the head of the ruse. The scene then transitioned over to the ceremony of candles for Austin's coronation/ordination. As one of the ruse read from one of the books that was in his palms, Austin was seated on a large throne next to the table full of candles. A large blue and purple robe with various layers wrapped around him. A king's crown rested gently on top of his head, and in his right hand was a golden staff with the symbol of the ruse, the circle with the flame in the middle of it. "And to this very day, now until the end of days, shalt thou forever known to be honored as Father Austin, leader of the ruse. So shall it be. So it is done. Hail, Father Austin! Hail, Father Austin!" the crowd proclaimed in a joyful unison, before all cheering in a celebratory and joyful manner. The scene then transitioned back to the familiar backyard, this time late at night. The Backyardigans all made their way towards the middle of the backyard after making their way out of Austin's backyard. "Well, Father Austin, it seems as though you not only got to kick some butt today, but also became the head of the kangaroos too." "How awesome is that?" Pablo said. "Yeah, I wasn't really expecting that, but certainly fun. You guys are okay though, right?" Austin asked. He was still dressed up in his robes that he had received. "Yeah, we're fine. But does this mean that we have to start calling you Father Austin from now on?" Tasha asked. "Nah, I'd rather just stick with my regular name. Anyway, speaking of which, my parents happened to make some celebratory snacks back at my house. Some mini lasagnas. How about a little late night snack sound? How does that sound tonight?" Austin asked. "That sounds awesome," everybody answered back. It's then that the startup of the outro began to play out, and like with every episode, Tyrone instigated the ending by saying, "That was an excellent festival adventure, don't you think?" Tyrone said. The others agreed before finally going into their intro theme song as usual, before finally ending with the group pose, before they all made their way back into the doorway to the fence that led to Austin's house, saying goodbye in the process. Before the episode ended, the entire Backyardigans crew immediately popped out of the doorway, and then, with the sole exception of Austin, yelled out, "Hail Father Austin!" before giggling and closing the door, ending the episode. God dang, was that one heck of an episode. Again, apologies for this taking so long to finish up. Work has been a huge pain for me recently back at the studio, and because of that, I wasn't really able to update this blog too well. So the last thing I will say, though, before I go to bed is like always, thank you for your continued support of this project. Hopefully sooner or later it'll come a lot sooner than anything. But until then, though, keep supporting this as best as you can. Every single ounce of love you give this project really helps us continue to grow it even more. And sooner or later, it'll be aired for all people to see.
In fear and surprise, as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave, glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping horde-driven nightmarish gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come at any day.